Hey, this is Bethany with Morgan James Publishing, and today I'm speaking with our author, Paul Edwards. And Paul is the author of Influencer Networking Secrets: How to Build Magnetic Influence, Meaningful Connections, and Profitable Publicity of a Radically Generous Entrepreneur. And this is the entrepreneur's guide to creating an unpaid sales force with giving, generous hands. Hi, Paul. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Bethany, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
We are so excited about your new book, Influencer Networking Secrets, and I'm so excited to ask you some questions about it. So, the first question I'd love to ask is really, what role does effective communication play in building a business?
What drove me to emphasize that stems from a degree, a background, I should say, with journalism. And I studied it in college, was fascinated by it, was a writer from a young age, used to imitate the Los Angeles Times sports section as a boy growing up, and created my own fantasy hockey league before sports was a thing. And from all those years of experience, the one thing I've learned is to always be asking the 5 questions that every professional journalist would ask, which are who, what, where, when, and how, and why, of course. And I found that those are also extremely effective communication tools. If you can remain in the posture of a curious interviewer, right? Somebody who genuinely wants to know more about everyone you meet, not just a celebrity, but any person that you're interacting with in business. If you can stay in that posture long enough, right? Eventually, and some go quicker than others, eventually they're going to turn around and reciprocate that back on you and say, well, tell me about you, right? And that's how the conversation begins to flower and develop, and you start to build the kind of quality relationships that lead to the success that you want in business. So I just sort of carried that with me and said, well, then everywhere I go, when I meet people, I'm always going to be asking one of those questions. And they get phrased differently each time with each person, no question about it, but you can always trace them back to who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Hmm. Awesome. So, what are the 5 tips for networking with dream connections then?
Yeah, this is a fun one. I stumbled into this by accident because I kept getting invited to parties and rooms and gatherings where, if you looked at it on the face of it, you'd say, you have no business being there, right?
Mm.
These people do not hang around with you ordinarily, and you don't hang around with them. And I'd say, you're right, but here I am, right? And so over time, I began to say, well, part of the reason I get invited to these rooms is because I don't show up in regular networking or regular interactions like everyone else does. And in the book, I say, don't go to a networking event to transact business, but go for business reasons, right? And there's a distinction there, right? It's sort of like, if you're there to transact business, you're trying to get people to give you money. If you're there for business reasons, you're there to meet people and create opportunities. And so I tell people the first thing is you got to be an angler, right? You got to think like a fisherman, a fly fisherman in particular, because that fly fisherman is casting that rod and he's making it look like there's a bug floating over the surface of the water, which is what lures the fish, right? If he just dangles it up there in the middle of the air, the fish is not going to fall for it. But he's casting it like at an angle so the fish thinks that there's a bug up there and comes up to get it and takes the bait, right? That was one of the first ones. I said, always have an angle that's different from everybody else. I also tell people, be a scout, right? So be on the lookout for opportunities for people you know, as well as for people you're meeting. In fact, if you can put the two together, that's even better, because then you start to become that relational hub that people they look to you for it. They look, oh, I wonder who he knows. I wonder if he knows somebody who can help me. I wonder who's in his network that I might want to meet. You want to create that sort of feeling when people are meeting you. Another one I said is be a therapist. And this is, I call this my unpaid profession. I first as an insurance salesman, and these days as a ghostwriter. I do a degree of listening that would probably make the average therapist say, you really need to charge for that. Because very often it has nothing to do with insurance or writing, but has everything to do with what's going on inside that person's soul, that the average person just is not going to be interested in hearing about. But you come across as interested in those kind of things about those people, and the world is your oyster. The other one I say is be a publicist, right? And this is about using your personal media platform, something that we have in this day and age. They didn't have it, 30 or 40 years ago so much, but now everybody's got a Facebook page, and not everybody, but a lot of people have a podcast. A lot of people have a YouTube channel. A lot of people are now getting active on Clubhouse, right? And you have a platform, you have influence, you have listeners, use it, but not for yourself. Use it to promote people in your network. Use it to give other people a voice besides yourself, right? There's more than that. They're not coming to me, but those are, I always tell people, come back to those fundamentals of thinking about, if I were this other person showing up to this networking event, what would I want to happen for me? And then go and provide it for them. Right. And that's as simple as it gets.
Wow, so many amazing golden nuggets just from these first questions already, and I love what you were first saying about just even the power of asking questions and all of those those tips that you just said for networking with their dream connections. They just make so much sense. So I know there's a lot more in your book that readers will glean as well. So this is just great to get a little bit of an introduction to all of the wealth of knowledge that you share within influencer networking secrets. So I know that businesses often want to influence the community and market that they serve. How should they go about getting it?
Yes, at the outset, you touched on this, and that is, I've long held this term I came up with to describe it. I call it my unpaid sales force, and these days they might actually send me an invoice if I'm not careful, going around talking about that. But what kept happening for me in insurance, and what happens for me now in ghostwriting, is when I approach my relationships like this, like I've described for you from the get-go, there's an invisible interaction that's going on between two human people, right? In my case, I'm the vendor, and then there's the client. Or, it's not always even with clients. Many times it's just with people that I develop good friendships with in business. This posture, this philosophy, this approach, this way of life, if you will, has a way of imprinting itself on people. Making an impression on them is probably how we would describe it in the common language. And I find that it ends up becoming a repeatable commercial almost that you embed in your strategic partners and allies and people who refer you, right? Your fan base, if you will. So what kept happening for me practically was I would be sitting there in my office back in my insurance days, and it happens for me now sitting in my office at home. I'm sitting there working on client work, has nothing to do whatsoever with what's about to happen. And my phone will ring or my email will buzz or something like that. And somebody who I did work for 3 months ago, 3 years ago, somebody who I haven't done any work for, but who I've made a very positive impression on by this approach to doing business, sends a message or calls to say, hey, I was talking to somebody who needs help with what you do, and you were the first person that came to mind, and I wanted to introduce you. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's, first of all, that's the best kind of selling you can do, right? Because you're not the person doing the sales. And it's like, you can hire appointment setters these days. You don't even need to hire an appointment setter. It's 100% free But what it costs you up front is being self-centered or, preoccupied with your own needs and wants. That's the price you pay.
Mm.
But at a practical level, in terms of actual dollars spent, doesn't cost a thing, right? You've embedded your commercial, your approach, your manner to that person. They've shared it with somebody else, and that person is taking their opinion and running with it and coming to you. And so when business owners say they want to build influence in the marketplace, I'm like, well, that's how you do it. You use what you have and you share it generously with others, and you don't worry about the return because you can trust it's going to come back to you in spades.
Amazing. What amazing information and mindset for people to carry with them in whatever market it is that they serve. That's really sound advice. So like I said, I feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface here. So if people want to learn more about you or about the book, what's the best place for them to reach you online or find more information?
I have a website. I found it's best if I spell this out because I'm never sure who's listening or watching, and I don't take the time. So THE Paul S as in Simon Edwards.com. ThePaulSEdwards.com is my website. You can get the book there. You can read more about me. You can interact with me. I go on social media under all the same handle as well, The Paul S. Edwards.
Amazing. Well, Paul, thank you so much for spending some time today and sharing some of these tips and this wisdom that you have hard earned and that you have had the generosity to write about and to share with readers everywhere with your new book. So congratulations on the new release of Influencer Networking Secrets, and thanks for spending some time with me today talking about your message.
Hey, thanks, Bethany, so much for having me. It was great to be here, and looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Awesome. Sounds great.